Critical Role Recap Season 2, Episode 42. So last week we ended with the Mighty Nein having finally reached Darktow, the pirate city that had been taken over by pirates some 40 years ago, and now serves as a den for the revelry. They met with King Wyatt and were indoctrinated into the revelry themselves. Pick up this episode with them. They go with Ivanica to the local tavern and have some drinks. Ivanica then heads up to her room and invites Ford up to come by later, and the Mighty Nein decide to go ahead and have a night walk to explore the city a bit. On this walk, they discuss their plans for what to do with Ivanica and what to do in the immediate future, but also in the more long term. They devise a plan where Jester is going to use a new spell that she has, I think it's Dimension Door, where she can teleport herself and someone else anywhere that she knows of 500 feet away. She's going to use that to get into Ivanica's cabin in order to rifle around and hopefully find some papers, some documents that might detail where the location of the next altar is, where they can set down this cloven gem that Ford believes they will be able to find at the shipwreck, where the ship that he was on initially that wrecked. And while that's happening, Ford is going to be distracting her by slapping fish with her in her room. Caleb and Caduceus will also keep a lookout and kind of be go-betweens and make sure that everything's going okay and be ready to respond in case anything goes poorly. So Jester ends up taking Knot onto the ship, and Knot has a pretty bad roll and sets off a gas trap that immediately starts filling the room with gas. They hold their breath and quickly rifle around and do manage to find some documents. They find a book and some jewels in one of the safes. And then Jester takes out her paint set and draws a hole in the floor in order for them to escape through. Jester pulls the rug over this hole as she drops down, and they both hide in the room below them, which is actually a crew cabin where there is someone sleeping currently. They hear the person walking around a bit, and then the person who responded to the trap being set off ends up falling through the hole that they had made and begins there's a bit of a scuffle between that person and the bed that was directly below the hole. They do manage to hide as the other two eventually wander off to go get some healing for the person who got stabbed to shit, while they're still kind of trying to figure out what the hell happened above them. And then Knot and Jester do manage to sneak out of the ship, and they are almost sighted again, but Jester uses a spell to make the person believe that the crow's nest he's in has caught on fire. So he then jumps from the crow's nest down to the deck of the ship and severely injures himself, breaking his leg. But it gives Jester and Knot an opportunity to get away unseen. So incredibly sloppy, lots of mistakes happen, but they do end up getting some documents that they eventually all meet up back at the tavern where they have rooms and begin going over the documents and looking at the items that they had picked up. Caleb identifies one of the necklaces, and apparently it's some sort of anti-poison necklace, essentially. It prevents poison or removes poison. We're not entirely sure exactly how it works, but it's basically some sort of protection from poison. The book that they found ends up being written in a cipher, and it seems to be Ivanica's diary. And he does manage to figure it out and reads through it and discovers her plans. He discovers that she does know the location of the next temple, the next altar that she plans to give up one of the cloven gems. And they discover that she has plans to, with this newfound power, take over the revelry from King Wyatt, from the Plank King, and begin her own rule over the sea, essentially. With this knowledge in this book, Caleb manages to roll a natural 20 and gets a 25, which is exactly the DC he needed, in order to create a cipher that would allow other people to completely decipher the entire book, because he only ciphered a couple pages. And so with that, they decide that they're going to give this information to the Plank King in order to get rid of Ivanica so that they can set off on their own to find the Cloven Gem and the next altar, and that way they can decide what to do with this power and how to control going about releasing this god or preventing the release of this god in order to just get rid of Ivanica, basically, so they can be safe and go on their own again. They decide to try and give it anonymously to the Plank King, because even though Bo had been asked by the Plank King directly when they first met to basically inform upon Ivanica, to tell him anything, to spy on her and give him any news that she learns about her. Even though that had happened, Ford's not super trusting and think that that might have been a test to see if they were loyal or not, or so he's a little worried. So they decided to try and give up this information anonymously. And then the next morning when they wake up, and the plan is about to kick into motion, they're actually woken up early by the entire crew, by Ivanica's crew, and are basically hustled out the door to go report on deck to the ship, where there's a general muster of all the crew because something has gone wrong. During this walk to the ship, Jester does manage to stealthily chuck away some of the gems, the jewels that they had taken from Ivanica in order to try and prevent someone from detecting them. However, it ends up being for naught, because as they get near the ship and start to be questioned by Ivanica has one of her crew members cast a locate object spell, we assume, and immediately kind of snaps her attention over to Caleb, who has Ivanica's book. Caleb immediately casts a firewall that separates them from most of the crew, or all of the crew. I'm not sure where their positioning is, but I think they're just off the ship and everyone else is basically on it. So he casts a firewall that draws a line in front of them, and that's where this episode ends off. So there wasn't really any combat this episode. There was a brief bar brawl that Jester started, but it was really just friendly and not really much happened there. And most of the time was spent coming up with the plan and then failing to completely enact it, and then getting woken up and taken immediately to the ship and being discovered. So the episode ends off immediately with him casting his firewall and separating the two groups. And so not next week, but the week after next, because they're taking a break off for Thanksgiving, we'll pick up with a huge bout of combat. And yeah, the party's in some serious trouble here, because not only are they going to be facing off against this entire crew, Ivanica's crew, and Ivanica, who's powerful in her own right, but on top of that, they've also broken the laws of the revelry by stealing from a fellow pirate and being caught in the act. So they are probably going to have to deal with some guards and potentially the full might of this pirate conclave. So they're in for, a really dangerous bout of combat. And so 2 weeks from now, when we pick up, we'll see. I mean, they could completely get wiped out. But yeah, so not next week, but the week after next should be a very exciting episode that you're probably not going to want to miss. But that's about it for now. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.